What's going on, guys? Right Mommy Teacher in the house, and I'm here with my GPL Week 7 Team Builder. Your Royal Bournemouth Mummies are taking on the Shiroi Shadows and my good friend Coach Shadow IX in an epic rematch of last season's final, where I sadly lost that game in rather disappointing fashion. But I am back. I've got a better team this time than I had last season, and I feel like my team building's improved a lot, so this match is going to be very different to last time, of course. So we're going to see how this one goes, but let's break down how Shadow's team. He's got that Mega Venusaur, of course, one of his main annoyances from our last match, really fat on both sides with solid special attack stat to go with it. Typically you see it with a Subseed set, carrying Earthquake coverage for things like my Infernape and my Registeel. Can also run things like Giga Drain, of course. There has been occasions he's opted not to run it, but I wouldn't be too surprised if he did. Can be a potential setup fodder for Cresselia, however, particularly with the Cresselia set that I'm bringing this week, but I'll tell you more about that later. Next up is Celesteela, of course. Surprisingly versatile one, got multiple sets really. Autotomy Sweeper set, bulky AV set, Subseed. It can run a lot of different things. It can even be like physical with things like Heavy Slam. Gets solid coverage options, things like Flamethrower and Giga Drain, which can be a little bit tricky to deal with, but ultimately, if I don't let it get set up, he won't be able to beat me too easily. Next up is Tornai, one of his Z users, of course. Often considered the lesser of the two Tauns, but no less of a threat, of course. It's got that Prankster and Defiant abilities, which can be really, really annoying. Got a pretty solid speed and a really good offensive stats in general, so it can function as a pretty solid wall breaker. It can be a pretty good pivot as well. Gets multiple coverage options, things like Heat Wave and Grass Knot and Superpower, which can be really hard hitting, particularly with a Z move, of course. Next up is Zydogo, one of his returning members from last season. Obviously the weakest of the Zygarde forms, but it's by no means less scary at all. It's pretty fast, a pretty decent attack stat, of course, has access to 1000 arrows, which is one of the most broken offensive moves in the game. Hits a lot of threats, got a really solid offensive typing with that dragon typing as well, which means anything that resists the steel type hits, or the 1000 arrows rather, can really get pressured by Outrage. Can run Banded, can run Scarf, the latter of course. He might try to run to outspeed my Aerodactyl, which I wouldn't be too surprised to see that. Next up is Nihilego, of course, one of his key Pokemon from last season. We are past the halfway point, so it probably will start using it a lot more. He has used it a couple of times already this season, so we have memed on him a little bit for it. But yeah, I think Scarf Nihilego has to come this week, personally. It hits pretty hard, potent late game sweeper thanks to Beast Boost, of course. Quad weaknesses to ground might be the stumbling block. I do have quite a lot of ground coverage on my team, so I wouldn't be too surprised to see if he gets a little dissuaded for Nihilego. But it's Nihilego, he loves that Pokemon, so I wouldn't be surprised if he brings it. Next up is Dusclops. This is the bane of my existence in last season's final. This thing's incredibly fat, incredibly bulky, of course, and add a Violet on top of that, it's just a wall. Last time he brought like Will-O-Wisp Hex against me. I feel like he's more likely to bring Toxic Hex this week instead of Will-O-Wisp Hex, because I do have an Infernape, which is very likely to come and just easily doesn't care about Will-O-Wisp. It's still super hard to break though, thanks to having that bulk in the Eviolite, so I will need to find a way to beat it. I have better answers for it this time round. I have better options to be able to remove those Toxics, so we will see if he does bring Dusclops. I feel like it has to come, just because it will give me trauma from last time, but yeah, nah, I think it's gotta come. Next up is kind of his wild card this week. I'm not too sure about this. Alola Ninetales is actually really, really strong against my team. My team doesn't really like Ice types all that much. Obviously, Alola Ninetales, particularly if it's Scarfed, can be a really good answer to Hydreigon. Can be a pretty solid answer to Mega Arrow as well, so I wouldn't be too surprised if he brought it. The Hail, of course, chipping away at my health bars all the time, and that Aurora Veil making his bulky mons that are already quite bulky and hard to break even more bulky and hard to break, which could be scary. So yeah, I think Alola Ninetales is a good shot at coming this week. I wouldn't be sure what he dropped for it, but I do think it's got a good chance of coming. Next up is Donphan. Donphan, rather unusual pickup for this team really, for Shadow and free agency a couple of weeks back. It's basically a physically bulky rapid spinner, of course, gets priority and Ice Shard. Does have a high attack stat though, so can take advantage of that. Suffers from a lack of speed though, and not very good on the special defensive side, so can easily be punished by some of my more specially offensive ones. I do have quite a lot of special offense on my team, so it is worth making note of that. Next up is Slowbro, of course. Slowbro mod I'm very familiar with. I used it in the PUL. Really bulky water psychic type with decent stabs. Got some solid coverage, things like Flamethrower and Grass Knot. Gets Regenerator and Slack off, of course, for longevity. But it's a little bit prone to entry hazards and toxic. So that's something to bear in mind. So I'm on the fence with Slowbro. Like, Slowbro I was on the fence of anyway. I do have things like Galvantula that hit it incredibly hard. It doesn't really like U-turns all that much and things like that. So I do have ways to beat Slowbro. I'm not sure if he opts to bring it because of that though. Next up is Dradagon. It kind of feels a little redundant on Shadow's team, if I'm honest, because Zydogo is often a much better dragon type. But nonetheless, Dradagon has some okay bulk, decent utility moves, things like Stealth Rocks, Glare, and Taunts can prevent me from setting up, of course. Really good abilities, Mold Breaker, Rough Skin, and Sheer Force, so can be pretty offensive. It's got a good attack stat, so it can make use of it. But, much like Donphan, it's far too slow to have really much of an impact. Gets outsped by even some of my slower mons on my team. And I do have things like Florges, which can threaten Dradagon out quite easily. Last but by no means least is the weirdest pickup I've seen from free agency. Shadow dropped Typhlosion, which was his only fire type for X-Cloud. X-Cloud, of course, was on Denistro's team last week and had no business coming against me because it gets murdered by Infernape. It's kind of the same deal this week. Not really any reason for him to bring it, in my opinion. I don't think it comes. It's too slow. Obviously, Specs Boom Burst is a thing, but that's pretty much all it really does. So for hazards, removal and stuff, he has 3 rockers in the form of Donphan, Nihilego, Dradagon. He has no spike setters. He has 1 toxic spike setter in the form of Nihilego. He has no webs. He has 1 defogger in the form of Tornai and 1 spinner in the form of Donphan. And he has a cleric in Alolan Ninetales' Hailbell. Right, so let's look at my team, shall we? So first up, it probably comes as no surprise to you, is going to be Wukong the Infernape, who for some reason has decided he doesn't want to be animated right now. Let me quickly fix that for you guys. Alright, there we go. So, typical physical Scarf Infernape this week. No fighting priority though. I don't feel like fighting does that much. I feel like it's too easy to bring in Dusclops against this thing. Interesting set, so of course, Earthquake pretty standard, hits quite a fair bit of his team. U-turn there for pivoting out. Aerial Ace actually hits the Venusaur pretty hard, thanks to obviously Thick Fat making him fire type moves a little weaker. Aerial Ace can hit him quite hard. It's not super strong, but it does more than things like Height Recovery, so we'll see here what he opts to bring. Blaze Kick is kind of the interesting one. Now, typically I usually run Fire Punch, but this week I felt like I needed the extra power. Blaze Kick gives you a better crit chance, gives you a high crit chance as well, and also a decent chance to burn. So I felt like I liked Blaze Kick this week. It is 90% accurate, which does suck, but it does hit pretty hard against quite a fair bit of his team, particularly the Alolan Ninetales. It can hit the Celesteela quite hard if he's not running physically bulky. But yeah, I like Infernape, of course. Infernape's one of my favourite ones on this team. Probably might lead it this week. I feel like it's a good lead in general against most teams. But yeah, he might predict that. Next up is going to be my Mega Aerodactyl, of course, Pteranodon. Making a pretty interesting appearance this week. Running 104 speed, which is enough speed to outspeed a max speed Zydogo, which is the fastest thing on his team. So any Scarfers will outspeed me, of course, which does suck. If the Zydogo gets +1, it will outspeed. But with my HP investment, it doesn't kill me with a +1000 arrows. So that's something that's worth noting. Aerial Ace, of course, hits the Venusaur pretty hard. Fire Fang hits the Celesteela quite hard, as well as the Alolan Ninetales. Ice Fang hits the Tauren if it comes. It also hits the Zydogo. And Earthquake murders Nihilego, of course. Pretty solid. I am a little concerned about Slowbro with this set, but that's fine because the next Pokemon I have on my team is a pretty decent answer to Slowbro. And that is gonna be, of course, Aragog, the Galvantula, running Scarf again. I know, I love my Scarf Speeder at the moment. It seems to be really effective. For me, the electric typing hits quite a fair bit of his team, particularly the Stealer, the Torn. It also hits the Slowbro pretty hard. Discharge, of course, spreading paralysis around would be nice. Giga Drain is actually not that bad. It does hit the Donphan, of course. It does hit the Slowbro as well. And HP Ice, of course, is there for Zydogo especially. Does also hit the Torn for a little bit of neutral damage, and also hits the Nihilego pretty well. So yeah, I like Scarf Speeder. Pretty solid. I think it will put in a bit of work this week. I don't think it's going to put in the best work, but I think it's one of the best ones I have for this matchup, because this matchup is surprisingly rough. Next up, making a return this week, is going to be Bluebell the Florges. Fully physically defensive this week. This is allowing me to take hits from the Nihilego. I can take nothing to this thing really. Even with Sludge Bomb, I've got the special defense to handle it. But it's mostly there for Zydogo. It threatens it out. It threatens the Druddigon out, of course, if it decides to come. Moonblast, pretty solid offensive move in general. Fairy hits a lot of his team relatively well. Aromatherapy is there to get rid of Dusclopses, Toxics and everything like that. Wish to support me up, and of course Defog to get rid of any entry hazards. I don't think he'll bring that many hazards this week, but I wouldn't be too surprised to see him try it. But I've got my reliable Defogger there in Florges. Next up is gonna be Iron Man, the Registeel, running a fairly standard Registeel set this week. Toxic, Stealth Rock, Seismic Toss, and Protect. With the leftovers, course recovery. Running fully physically defensive with a specially defensive nature. This allows me to sponge hits from pretty much anything. Toxic, of course, hits everything except the Venusaur and the Nihilego. Rocks is there, Hair, of course, to chip down to this team. S-Toss hits everything except the Dusclops, and Protect, of course, to scout outfield moves. Pretty standard, really, there's not too much in the way of complicated things about this. This is kind of walled by Dusclops, which is a little concern of mine. I was considering running something else over Protect, but I felt like Protect was perfectly acceptable in this particular match. And last but by no means least, it's back again. I like this set quite a little bit. I changed this from the original set I had, but we're bringing Subcar Mind, Cresselia with max speed, timid, and max special attack. This will allow me to outspeed all of his slower mons from Mega Venusaur downwards, barring of course any Scarfers on the slower mons, which will allow me to be able to sub up on the Venusaur Horde to prevent things like the Toxic hitting me, and be able to set up Calm Mind on it and potentially sweep his team. That's the aim, of course. Can be a little tricky to sweep. He does have some fast Pokemon like the Torn, like the Nihilego, the Zydogo, and the Alola Ninetales all outspeed it. But I outspeed everything else, so we will see how this goes. But yeah, that's going to be my team for this week. This match is going to be kind of a tough one for us. Hopefully I've brought the right team this time round. I can't guarantee that I have, of course. Shadow's a very creative team builder, so it will be a little difficult to play against him. But either way, this match doesn't have too much of a implication to the league. So I will still be ranked 2 by the end of this match. So we're going to have fun, of course, playing against my good friend. But yeah, I'm rambling now, so I'm going to get on out of here, save the rest of my voice for the battle. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Robombi Teacher. I'm your coach at the Royal Bomber for Bombies. Stay safe, stay awesome. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.